So we've got...
Well, I left for 11:30. We're going backwards.
Been like that all morning, Councillor. If we can just approach this from the detail that's been tabled in the plan, and you'll see that on your attachment plan itself. And we'll look at the, if you like, the presentation. We'll do the content and then followed by the presentation thereof after that. That's okay?
Of the carry forwards?
No,
the report
of
itself.
the plan. And so the content, I'm meaning the presentation, particularly of the financials in it,
Sure.
and then the CapEx in it.
Yep.
And then we'll go to, I think Drew Coe will do the presentation, is that correct?
On the comms,
Yes, comms on.
side of it. So Drew's probably happy to come and talk to the communications plan and what we're proposing to communicate
Sure.
to the community.
Okay, so we'll do this in two halves.
Going two halves.
Yeah, in two halves. So, Jess, can you lead us off, please, into the content?
Sure. So firstly, the annual plan was initially reviewed by the Finance Audit and Risk Committee. So just would like to comment that feedback received from the Finance Audit and Risk Committee hasn't been included in the detailed annual plan that's included on the agenda, and that was just a timing challenge, but it will be included. The feedback around the commentary and the narrative will be included and updated in the annual plan that's brought back to the 26th of June council meeting for adoption.
Jess, just with the exception that the introduction was upgraded as per the feedback from the committee. So.
And the double page spread, which is the ad that we're intending to place in the newspaper from tomorrow, has been updated with feedback from the Finance Audit and Risk Subcommittee. So there was some feedback, particularly around the language, the use of language.
It hasn't been updated. I'm just looking at it now. So, yeah, it is the two-page spread that's been updated.
But did you say that's going in the paper tomorrow?
Correct.
That's the
So
plan.
there's no room for movement on that?
Not of the two-pager, as I understand it. So the timing imperatives around it are such that we had to go with the Audit and Risk Committee's feedback.
Can I just ask, what's the status of this? This is a plan that we're now just advising the public about? This is a plan that consultation's in effect completed?
So
This is
we
a plan
decided
that the audit office has now approved or not approved? Or?
The annual plan isn't audited by Audit New Zealand.
Yeah.
And we agreed as a council, you agreed to not consult on the annual plan this year, given that there's no substantial material change to year 2 of the LTP. So what we're planning to do is run some double-page newspaper ads informing people what the increase is and what it represents, and that's the double-page spread. And then the annual plan will be released on our website. So we're not intending to market, I suppose, the full
So this
annual
is
plan.
not a consultation?
It's not a consultation.
So you're able to influence content at this point? Well, relatively so.
Yes, that's correct. So we'll take feedback today on the annual plan itself, and then we'll bring it back to you on the 26th of June, which is when you need to adopt the annual plan.
But we are deciding the carry forwards.
Yes, so the annual plan here assumes that the carry forwards we've presented to you on the paper are included in this paper, but we're asking for your support of those today so that they can be amended depending on the conversation. But we've had to make some assumptions to present the annual plan to you.
Will it be going to the RPC? That's that one there, isn't it?
It wasn't an intention to do so. It will be adopted by Council on the 26th of June, but we can certainly give a presentation at the RPC on the 3rd of July on what's contained within there.
So it's fair to say, that in response to Toru's question, which is a fair one, there's no intention to make decisions. These were decisions that in this plan were made 12 months ago,
In the long-term plan.
the long-term plan. And all we're doing is carrying on with what we've done.
Correct.
We have to give an annual update on it, but we're not making a decision.
Or what we haven't done, depending on the vote.
Oh, yeah, well, we haven't done that. But also, when it comes down to it, having to talk about content, you can only talk about content to the extent that it doesn't require a change of any significance to the plan.
Correct.
Well, I raise the issue of whether you're acting in good faith here, given the RPC wasn't involved in the long-term planning thing. So I think in terms of some of these issues, I think it needs to go to the RPC.
Mr. Chairman, I'm a bit disappointed that this two-pager, which I think you're telling me is set in concrete now, does not indicate the areas of substitution and modification to the long-term plan.
So if there were significant...
I understood that it was going to be incorporated.
Well, if there were significant modifications and substitutions required, we'd be having to reconsult.
But we did receive your feedback through the Finance Audit and Risk Committee, and we will, in the actual annual plan that comes to you on the 26th of June, will include a table of any changes between year 2 of the LTP and the annual plan.
Just following up
just
what
hang on a
Alan
second.
just asked there, did you not amend the two-pager
Yes, we did.
to take account of all that? Because that was the concern Councillor Dick had, was that it wasn't clear in the two-pager, which is the one that's going to go in the one that's going to be publicised through the paper and stuff.
Where we landed at the Finance Audit and Risk Committee was that we would include in the annual plan a table of any changes between or variances between year 2 of the LTP and the annual plan, but we didn't think that it was appropriate for the high-level comms in the newspaper ad.
Well,
That content.
Well, let's just do this in order. We'll come back to the comms, which I regard the two-pager as the comms part, and complete the detail, because we may have some conversations about either the annual plan document itself or the two-pager as we go through. Not that we can do much about the two-pager. So let's just go to the content to start, and come back to you, Alan, on your comment, because it's a comms issue. So can you just walk us through? I want to start at page 19, which is the financial information, and I don't know if we've captured there the significant issues around the capex that we're about to enter into in a number of areas. We certainly haven't identified the capex items. We're making very significant capital investments, and we haven't said so in that page in that report on page 19.
Okay.
Sorry, so you're talking about the graph, which is where funding comes from?
Well, we've made a comment here, and I think it should be financial information. If we've got a major investment going on in a number of areas, we ought to be saying so in that commentary.
Major capital items, so...
Well, we'll get to CapEx shortly and identify them, but what we've identified in the long-term plan, and which has found its way into the annual plan, and also into the carry forwards, for example, is a host of capital investments that are new and increased and or substantial, and the public is not made aware that that's a substantial activity that we've engaged in.
Sorry, I'm confused. Page 19 is funding.
Well, it's financial information.
Well, it's just the start of the financial information section, which goes on for many, many pages and quite a lot of detail. I'm not trying to be vexatious here, Chair, but I'm just trying to get really, really clear what the request is prior to us representing this on the 26th of June.
Well, I'll go back to it. In addition to our operational expenditure and operational profit and loss, which we've identified, that's the funding that we're of, we've got major capital activity going on. And that's not expressed particularly well in the financial information section.
Sorry, is it page 19 of the agenda or the attachment?
It's on there.
Some narrative around what the annual operating budget is and what the annual capital
The attachment annual plan at page, I'm assuming it's 19 as well.
Yep.
It is an overview of the financial information contained therein. When you go through those many pages subsequent to that, and including the paper on the CapEx carry forwards, what it's saying is that there are very significant capital expenditures and investments going on, and we're not detailing, or at least flagging that as a part of that.
The quantum of the
Yeah.
capital borrowing.
I think he's talking about specific projects as opposed to the quantum, Jess. So let me just check, Chair, on page 21, you've got the broad categories. So if you go to the page 21 down there, you've got the broad categories of CapEx.
Sure.
And then over the page on 26, you'll see the external debt.
Right.
On the next one over, 26. 26, so you need to go one more. You'll see a listing of all of those different things.
Yes, indeed.
Where, I mean, they are essentially the capital items.
Yes.
So you'll see sustainable homes, 14 million there.
It's the balance.
I don't think it's,
That's the loan balance, 14. This is the expenditure up here.
All right, so what we've got is very significant investments in a range of areas, and I'm suggesting we need to flag that in our commentary to the public around it. We need to say that we are making these significant investments and increasing our borrowing. Yes, they can go to that and add it up themselves, but I think there might be one or two people that actually do that, but not many more.
okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. We'll find a way to express that.
So what you're saying there, Chair, is that in the long-term plan we had $18 million of proposed CapEx, but in the annual plan it's only 14.8. That's from page 21.
Well, is it with the carry forwards?
No, it's not with the carry forward.
No.
That's excluding the carry forward.
So we've got another 4 million coming in the carry forwards.
Okay. Is there a required level of disclosure or content to this report?
So all of the financial statements that are included are required. Effectively, that's why they're there. In terms of is the question more around level of material variances between the long-term plan and the annual plan?
So it can't
There's a
end
bit
at
of
page
flexibility.
21.
Pardon?
It can't end at page 21.
No, it can't end at page 21, unfortunately.
Lost my attention.
It's the man who delves into detail all the time. It must be a murky place.
That's why we put those at the back, I think. It's the,
What I'm trying to get my head around here, between you two at the front, is what is the problem?
All I'm trying to say is that we've got an increase of something like 40% in our borrowing, and I think we ought to say that.
Yes, and so, look, that was predominantly that increase in borrowing relates to the erosion control scheme and sustainable homes. And so in our focus area, four areas earlier in the document, I'm wondering whether we just make clearer in those narratives around our high priority areas that we have some significant capital expenditure which is loan funded in the narrative that's in there.
And you want to put sustainable homes in the narrative, otherwise people get totally confused.
Yeah, so if you're going to
Yeah,
put,
so sustainable homes is number two.
To
In
be
there.
really clear, otherwise just say, yeah, let's see what the headline will be.
Rex is just saying, in the sentence you just gave, make sure you say it's an extent of finance borrowing for sustainable homes and erosion control.
Yeah,
People say, all right, you're borrowing for that, well, that's okay.
yeah.
But I'm sure someone will pick up on the fact that we've increased our net borrowing by 40%.
Yes, and that was made very clear in the long-term plan.
But
It
now we're
was.
saying, yeah. Okay. Any other issues?
We can put this out as a document, and if anybody guesses it, we can have a prize for the ratepayer who comes up with a question, just to help them.
I take your point.
Ensure that they read the documents.
I take your point, councillor. But
What are you proposing as a prize?
I know, something significant.
Dinner with Neil, I reckon.
The candidate pool of 10.
Dinner for two with Neil Curtin.
now, are there any other probing questions about? Are there any other? You'll have a question, I'm sure, about the content, councillor. Is there anything else that you'd like to see incorporated into the annual plan document?
Well, I just have a question around if carry forwards don't go forward, either in part or in whole, what influence will that have over all this documentation?
So this will all have to be revised before the 26th. But yeah. And then in terms of the operational impacts, there's no way we can generalise about that. We have to go through each of them because they're all very, very different in terms of their impacts on the organisation. Some are quite different in terms of their financial implications.
There'll be huge impacts. They'll be, if you don't carry forward these.
There are.
Collectively, yes, but what I'm cautioning against is generalising. There's a whole variety of different activities in there. But yes, the annual plan, as adopted on the 26th of June, will incorporate whatever changes are made in today's decisions.
Yeah. But I sense in the question that's raised by Fenton and by Rex that there are two possible things here. Yes, the carry forwards, if they're not not endorsed and carried on, could be coming at, well, I suspect, I may be wrong, Fenton's perspective is it's significant money, so therefore we could not do the carry forwards and therefore have a lesser of a rate increase. It's one extrapolation of that. On the other side of it, we have argued as a council that we've been underfunded for quite some time and incapable of doing the job to the standard we want. So if we constrain their income, we're then making sure that we remain in that position in the longer term. The third point I'd make is if we carry forward the carry forwards and don't utilise it to the full extent, we're still in a position to reallocate that funding to other causes if we so wish. So do we want to carry the cash forward or not, is the question.
So look, on that final point, if you were looking to reduce rates next year, you would need to carry forward funds to offset the lost income. So not carrying forward doesn't give you a rates decrease in the coming year.
Yeah.
It is, you actually need to carry forward.
Isn't it, really?
Offsets the deficit.
Yes. That's right. So the budget is what the budget is for next year as per the annual
No, I
plan.
agree with that.
And look, and we run the risk of getting ahead of ourselves in terms of going into the carry forwards, but a very large proportion of what is proposed is underpinned by a big leverage of central government money, which we hope to have announced
Exactly right.
within the next week or so. So if that doesn't get carried forward, then we start unravelling all
Exactly.
sorts of things. But look, we'll get to that in detail shortly.
I think you should start with that point.
Right. Well, let's roll with the current content. Has anyone got any issue with regard to the content of the annual plan? Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, page 17.
The attachment or the...
This is the attachment, the draft copy of the agenda of the plan.
2019-20 rates at a glance. I understood that we were looking at having a similar graph there to what was, this is what was proposed under the long-term plan for year 2, and this is because there's been some shunting of money from one part to another, which is how we've managed to keep the rates increased to 7.9 but still have funding for other parts.
We did look at the variances between the annual plan and year 2 of the long-term plan, and the variances were so small or immaterial, it was sort of difficult to express what they were.
Okay, so I would suggest then that's something you need to make clear in that rates at a glance, that this is essentially unchanged from what was in the long-term plan.
Yeah. I mean, the percentage movement was less than 1% on any
Yeah,
particular.
no, it's within the
Yeah.
margins of error, yeah.
Doesn't it say that? Percent?
Well, it does
Rates
say-
could forecast the long term for the 5 represents. That's how I'd have drawn that.
We can just make it doubly clear.
Yeah.
Chair, I need to be excused.
You excuse, councillor. Are there any other issues
Travel
you want to see?
Please stop asking us that and move on
Okay,
to the...
right. Well,
Well, just
I second that.
just one, Chair.
It's time for you to...
His hand was
So
up
it's
first.
actually not an issue but a question, and it's on the same page that Paul's just raised. So you've got 0.5% for West Shore renourishment. What's the actual quantum?
Too much.
$500,000.
400,000 is the actual, was the last contract cost for West Shore Renourishment,
400k.
400k.
That's the total project cost.
That's the total
Our
project
share's
cost.
200.
Our share's 200, yeah.
did you have another question? Can I go to page 21? We've got other revenue and a note 3, and you'll see there that we jumped from 16 mil to 101 mil, and obviously that's the port capital coming to us. When you go to the note itself on page 25, all it refers to is dividend. We go from up to 90 million there, which is dividend plus capital
Yep,
proceeds. So can we somehow note
sure.
against dividend what that includes?
Yep.
And going back to page 21, we've got community net lending from reserves. I now understand that's clean heat. Can we have a brackets clean heat there so that's identified? Right.
So just, Chair, just a generic question. I mean, the first 2 pages, we want cleaner water, better environment, get all that. We're into it, well into the work, but we've got $6 million we've got to carry over. How do we reconcile that page with a $6 million carryover?
I think we should perhaps come back to that question after we've been through all of the carry forward discussion.
Okay. So,
And just to give you an example of that, the funding which has been agreed for this planting season for the erosion control scheme fully consumes all of which is allocated for year 1 in the LTP. The issue we've got is that the year ends right in the middle of the planting season, and so we've got some of that expenditure, a good portion of it's falling into the next financial year, and that's just something which wasn't anticipated when the scheme was established. And so we're actually going to spend, so in terms of are we into it? Yes, we're into it, and yes, we're going to spend what was allocated in year 1. But it's just impossible for us to have all of that planting undertaken before the 30th of June. Just
I don't buy it.
by way of example. Well, that's
Because
that's a
we're-
factual statement.
but we're
into the next discussion. Right.
Yeah.
I just coming back to it, circle back to where I came before. I said I think you better have this conversation now because it's going to underpin all of the other conversations that go on.
Yes.
You just see that by Fenton's view, he will have all of it. This is the key to it, isn't it?
Yes. Well, let's go to that point. And Jess, you would have seen a CapEx paper produced, and I asked Jess to modify it by incorporating with the one that was distributed today.
Yeah.
To modify it by including the entire CapEx for each particular project, so you could see the context of the carry forward, what the global project was and what the carry forward component was. And we will talk about that. Yes, do you want to now walk through the CapEx carry forward paper?
Sure. Do we want to go through the OPEX first or focus on CapEx first?
Through the OPEX?
OPEX.
So you only gave us CapEx, so the
Yes,
OPEX
I
is
did.
in the original.
It's in the original.
so-
Sorry, that's confusing.
So erosion control scheme, we've just had that conversation. I don't know, Jolene, if you want to perhaps come up and provide or answer any further questions that there might be around the spread of expenditure. So as I said, in terms of, in fact, we are currently agreeing to this planting season a little bit more than was available in year 1 of the LTP for erosion control scheme, as I understand it. But because it straddles 2 financial years, we will be able to fund that excess expenditure this planting season. But over the next year, we will be needing to look at how we forecast for the coming planting season, taking into account this reality that the financial year end is going to end right in the middle of the planting season.
So if I could just add, the carry forwards are expected or estimated as at the end of June. So when the paper was prepared and we started collating this information in May, there'll be a little bit of variation between actual accruals at the end of the year and what's carried forward. So last year, for example, I think we requested closer to $700,000 worth of OPEX carry forward, but the actual carried forward was about $500,000. So if more work is done by the 30th of June, we will accrue the cost into this year. So it could have a little bit of an impact on the carry forward OPEX.
We just had a comment before from Fenton. He said, well, I don't buy that. So I'd like to hear what is
So in simple terms, the quantum of rate increase this current financial year should have been less and next year should have been more, right? There was a lack of accuracy around, I mean, we all knew that a bulk of planting happens July, August, September, right? We know that. We're the science guys. We get that stuff. The allocation at the time was incorrect. That's the bit I'm having real trouble with.
Well, I think we...
Indefensible.
I think there's a couple of things that went on. As you'll be aware, the standing up of the doubling of the size of the land management team, locating them in new offices by power, expanding the wild oil presence, putting them on the ground with a signed-off policy around the ECS took a number of months towards the end of last year, which we had not anticipated. And so you could have said that we should have expected not to be up and running for the best part of 6 months into the year before we're actually starting to do deals with landowners. And then in terms of the procurement of the plants and paying for the labour and all the various different things which are occurring, we could have been more precise on that. So I think your assertion is correct to an extent, but I don't accept the fact that this is an easily forecastable level of activity. It's utterly dependent on demand from farmers, and we made assumptions about that. We were very clear with Council that the funding profile over the LTP for this was going to be likely to be varied from what we forecast to actual. And next year, you said that possibly there should be more next year. Well, actually, it's not clear to us whether we will expend all of next year as well. So I think the reality of this, given it's demand-driven, it's sustained for sustainable homes. We've got people out there trying to promote what we're doing as much as possible, but the ultimate uptake is not something that we totally control. So there will be year-to-year variances between our forecast and what actually comes through. And if that's a criticism, and it's going to be a sustained criticism, then I don't know what the technical solution to that is, because we haven't got a crystal ball telling us what landowners are going to be prepared to do this time next year by way of activity on the farm.
I put it slightly differently, different perspective. The problem I see that you have in these things is if you, for example, use a simple figure, 3 million, and you're going to spend $1 million in one financial year and 2 million in the following financial year for a single project. So 3 million, which is how it happens to span 1/3 this financial year and the other. And you go out and say, we're only going to budget for this project, which is a complete project, 1 million this financial year, and we're then going to go and budget for the 2 million in the following year. Now, if I was a supplier and you wanted me to plant trees and go and put all those trees, you said, I've got a $3 million planting program, and I'd say, well, what commitment to it? Oh, well, we've got 1/3 of the money now, but we'll have to go back and get the other 2/3 later. You know, well, what confidence do I have about that? So the problem we've got here is, I think, a technical one. So if you're going to do a project, well, then you have to have it as the complete. That's how I would view this. I'm quite comfortable with that. So if we're going to do $3 million worth of planting, well, then we commit to $3 million planting. If we're only going to spend a third of it this financial year, and the other 2/3 the other financial year, well, then it's a carryover. But the decision is a total, complete one, isn't it?
Look, it is. The alternative, if Council is wanting definitive numbers year by year, is to do what we have seen the Crown do on occasion, and that is that you sign somebody up for a program of works, but you can't deliver it in the coming, say, planting season.
Yeah.
And so we would say that you have to wait. You do the deal with us and you have to wait 12 months before work can be done, and that will enable us to come to Council to say, over the next year, this is what's agreed.
Exactly.
And it takes all of the agility out of the program. And so, that obviously becomes a disincentive for landowners, because you have to sign up to the Council, make a commitment, and then nobody's able to do anything for 12 months, just so for our financial purposes, we've got precision year to year. And it certainly hasn't been the practice historically with these types of funds that the Council has administered. The Regional Land Care Scheme regularly had underspends that were carried over.
Exactly, that's the box.
Can I just clarify, this is specifically a discussion on the $600,000 carryover in the middle of page 71, is that right?
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So can I just ask a couple of slightly more generic questions, because I've actually got more problems with the OPEX carryovers than the CAPEX ones, but I do note that the total carryover is, what, 10% of our total spend, which is not insignificant.
Total.
Operating.
Sorry?
Our total operating budget
Yeah.
is in excess of 50 million, so it's
So it's,
the 1.6 is
okay, so it's 10%.
No, it's
Oh,
not-
1% is the,
it's-
is the OPEX, yeah.
2%, 3.5%.
8%.
What assurance can you give us that because you've got all of these carryovers, you're not going to run into exactly the same problem and have exactly the same discussion in 12 months' time?
So with respect to the erosion control scheme, my expectation is that it will be a permanent fact of us being unable to predict with any precision. We can provide guesstimates, and we have already got a staged ramp-up of investment based on, what had to be some pretty broad assumptions in designing the scheme. We will get better at forecasting that demand as we've got more engagement with landowners, and we get obviously a better feel for the level of demand and the timing around that. So we'll get better at it, but we won't ever be able to be absolutely definitive. So to run the scheme, you'll always need carry forwards. I think, look, similarly, the other bulk of these funds here relate to the schemes, and the schemes have always, certainly from what I've seen, have always had carry forwards from year to year, and the work is typically moves around based on the ability to get work done,
Yeah,
etc.
although some of the descriptions, I've got to say, James, for instance, if you look at 22, Muddy Creek on page 74, seek 12,000 to be carried forward to project 294 reserve. Planned maintenance for the scheme is under budget. Well, fine, that's great, it's under budget. That's all we needed to spend. Why are we going to carry it forward? And there are several that I could make exactly the same comment about.
So there's a few reasons for that. One is Muddy Creek is a targeted rate, so we have a targeted rate and a top up from the general rate. So we're actually rated for that scheme. The other issue is the maintenance cost is not static year to year, so the rate is actually an average of maintenance, a long-term average. Some years we'll have overs and some years we'll have unders. So we're saying for Muddy Creek, we actually did planned maintenance for less than the revenue brought in. But likewise, 1 or 2 years down the track, we could have a major non-recurrent piece of maintenance, and we will go over the rates that we've rated for the year because we're drawing on the reserve.
All right, so you're carrying this over as OPEX, but in fact you're wanting to reserve it.
Well, each of the schemes has a reserve where the excess, which smooths out the
Yeah, it gets
year-to-year
tight. Yeah, I
differences.
understand what you're saying, but it's not very well described here, I've got to say.
So
And
that's
that's probably caused quite a bit of confusion amongst us looking at it.
And that practice that Chris has just referred to is long-standing, and it's how the schemes have always operated. There is a more general point, though, which is made through here, and that is that we've been understaffed in the engineering area for the best part of, actually it began about 3 years ago, and we have, while we've been recruiting, we've also been losing people, and we've had people on maternity leave, and we've had 3 of our most senior asset staff leave in the last couple of years, and so Chris has been in this never-ending process of trying to get up to full staff, and that has had an impact on our ability to do all the work as quickly as we would like.
So is there any reason for us to expect that's going to change?
Well, absolutely. I mean, once we're at full complement.
Yeah, so if we look at it, in the last year we've churned over, and so this is just general churn of new people having to come up to speed. In the last year, had a new GM, that's me, a new manager regional assets, so they're responsible for all of that maintenance type work. We've recruited a new manager regional projects, which was a new role to focus on capital delivery. That person starts in the 1st of January. We've just signed up a project manager, July,
yep.
Sorry. Just signed up a new project manager as well. We have a new team leader open spaces and a new team leader scheme. So it's very unusual to go pretty much through every single one of our team leaders or people managers in a 12-month period, so that churn has been significant. In terms of vacancies, all of those positions I just mentioned were vacant for a period. The team leader schemes was vacant for probably 5 months. So all of those vacancies, plus a design engineer, a modeller, a project manager and a lead asset manager. So we've filled the modeller, we've filled the project manager, we've still got design engineer and lead asset manager to go. So I think once we recruit the new team, it will stabilise. But we have had a massive amount of turnover and churn, which just, people aren't there, and then when new people come, they need to get up to speed with how everything works. So,
Any other issues on the OPEX carryover? So it's 1.619 mil of those.
So back to number 14, isn't our main issue here, there was no tension, there's never been any tension in the discussion. It's just been a bloody mad dash for cash. The rich cockies, the big organised guys have taken big chunks of money, but actually there's a whole heap of other farmers out there that are saying Minister Jones' money is actually better. I'm seeing evidence of that at home. I don't know about elsewhere in the region. And I'm just wondering, are we ever going to spend this money?
So Minister Jones's money typically relates to large-scale afforestation. Our focus is on erosion control, particularly spaced planting, and so we're operating in a different space. The overlap is the Hill Country Erosion Fund, and as you know, we were successful in securing $5.4 million of Hill Country Erosion Fund out of the 1 Billion Trees program, particularly focused in the Wildwood District, and recruitment's now underway for staff to make that investment. Between those funds and the funds here, we have got an ambitious program. As we said, we were asked to come up with an ambitious program. We've come up with an ambitious program. The numbers are large because we're trying to deal with the issue at scale and at pace. Will we continue to have uncertainty about how that rolls out? Absolutely. And so I'm not going to sit here today and say definitively we will know that we can spend all of that. We're going to try as hard as we can. It is underpinned by risk analysis on farms about where the biggest issues are, and we are focusing on the subcatchments where the biggest water quality issues from sediment arise. So it's not as if it is a scattergun, it is focused, and we've got an army of staff out there talking to landowners this very day. So we're doing our best to make as big a dent into the issue as we possibly can with the resources that you've made available.
Is this 14 match funded?
So
Is there money at risk if this doesn't go forward?
The 600,000, so some of it, as we said before, is committed. In fact, all of this is effectively committed by way of agreements with landowners. Yep. Jolene's nodding her head. Yep.
So you haven't had a chance to say anything. Would you like to comment?
I just think that actually staff have done a fantastic job. So they really hit the ground running about October, November last year when the interim operating model was established, and also the IT systems are still being established. And I think that they're now committed to the 1.38 million that they're doing for this planting season. I think that's great, and I think that trajectory is just going to increase. So I think they're doing a great job.
I'd be concerned that the staff somehow were getting the message from the discussion we're having around the table today that they should be spending money like a lolly scramble just to make sure that they meet their budget. And it's clear to me, because we are asking for these carryovers, that that's not the case, that the spending that we are doing is being done sensibly and efficiently, and that it'll eventually catch up, especially with a number of these, like the erosion control scheme, whether it's this year or next year or the year after, that'll happen.
Look, it's a good point, and one of the reasons why this is taking as long as it is to stand up as a policy is the degree of thoroughness that is required. So for each and every application, there's a detailed analysis of the property. There are photographs. There's planning all around it. I'm advised that most properties will need to be visited between 6 and 8 times. That is the nature of the intensity of the engagement with the landowner. So it's not as if you come into our offices, fill in a form, and we send you a large cheque. Actually, it involves site visits, it involves agreement around where the risk is on the property, and a whole bunch of planning around it. So we are doing this job very thoroughly.
Yeah. And on the other side of this too, though, let's also put ourselves in the context. This council has a step change in the amount of work it's doing in this area, a significant change. For a long number of years, some private landholders did more riparian plantings than this council, and more in erosion control. We were very weak in this area. So there's now been a massive uptake, and it's going to continue to climb, and it will take us a while to get the systems and the processes in place that will be, which we can micromanage, we'll try and micromanage better. I'm particularly comfortable with this. I don't have any anxiety about this. I just think this is a natural consequence of a rapid change in direction.
Well, there's a bit of that. Let's move on. We've got that list of OPEX there, including erosion control, and the schemes that have obviously engineering related issues. Some of the others, the land transport strategy, future farming, etc. I'm sure there'll be equally compelling arguments as to why they are carried over. Unless there's anything else in the OPEX, let's move on to CAPEX. And Jess, can you take us through that?
Sure.
So no questions, other questions on the topics?
We do have one meeting of the Future Farming Initiative before the end of the fiscal year. We could up the dinner budget for it if you would like to see us spend more.
Yeah, well, I was going to comment on that and what are these guys doing?
You want to deal with that? You want to deal with that now? The future farming initiative.
Oh, do you want to go to? Do you want to have a comment on future farming? I was going to move to CAPEX, but
Actually, I think through great stewardship of you two councillors, we haven't spent that money, and it was the first year was to set up. There'll be some ongoing costs. Mr. Skurman can comment probably to actually get the trust in place, but I don't. That 130 doesn't need to go forward, surely.
So 130 would be the maximum that goes forward. I mean, we do have, we're in a recruitment process for the permanent trustees as we speak, and so there's an invoice to be approved on that. We are in the process.
It will come out of the 130.
Well, so the 130 is the maximum that can go through. And so
The reason I say that, it doesn't need to be carried forward because the costs will lie where they fall. Even if the invoice comes in the middle of July, surely it can be sheeted back to this financial year.
So my concern there is,
They'll be what they are.
so my concern there is that I think we're roughly on track for what we felt would be the establishment costs of this, which was hosting, the group, the establishment working group that led to the establishment of the permanent entity, including the work that's been done around, mission and vision and obviously legal expenses and things like that. And so I think we'll be on budget for that. My concern is that the horsepower or the intent of that program is to provide funding and support for programs or initiatives that pursue that purpose. And so if we did not carry forward, then we'll be going into year 2 with a much smaller budget. So this is a function of, in some respects, some of the discussions and comments that have been around the place in terms of, once the funding was approved in July, there was a need to onboard and recruit and staff to support, and then the process that we've gone through, in hindsight, could have been quicker, could have, preferably would have been quicker, and it's just taken longer.
So apart from this 130k, what's the budget for?
Total was 600 over 3 years.
650 over 3 years was the total budget, and so it was just, and perhaps again, the benefit of hindsight, it was underestimating how long it would take to get this establishment phase through. The budget would have been more, I think, when I'm thinking back to the paper, it was an intention that it would take 6 to 8 months to go through the setup phase, and then the future farming group would be into its work in terms of allocating that funding. So this is not operational funding, it's really to support those programs and those initiatives in pursuit of the outcomes that group has set down.
From my standpoint, we have managed the money effectively to get through the setup process, and we should be rewarded by having some additional funds to put into the meat of the program now that we're at that point.
So does it make
So
any
we're
difference? Does it make
micromanaging
any difference if we
the,
don't carry this forward, but we increase the budget for the future farming fund for the next year?
It definitely has the same impact.
It has the
I
same
mean, we do
impact.
exactly the same. Let's
So
do
we'll
that.
provide a
The Fenton will
surplus
be
for
happy.
this year.
Get no carry forward.
So
We've got a
he makes a
budget
good
increase.
point. So we're comfortable with all of those OPEX carried forward? Any other questions raised? If not, let's go to...
Remember, hold your peace.
So,
In terms of CAPEX, it's worth noting that the 4 million doesn't impact the actual, or doesn't in total affect the rates collected in year 1 of the LTP. A lot of these capital expenditure items would have been depreciated or the cost spread over multiple years. So it's not a $4 million impact on this year's budget per se, but it would obviously has had an impact in terms of not servicing the debt and repayments in year one. So in terms of total capital expenditure, the original year two in the LTP had planned capex of around 15 million for these project items, and the 1.6 million for water investment was actually not included as capex. That was if you recall, we had 5 million and we allocated it 1.6 over 3 years, and we weren't sure what the nature of the allocation of that fund would be, whether it would be capital expenditure into infrastructure or whether it would be feasibility, OPEX or grants. So it wasn't actually included as capex, but we've included it as a capex item to be carried forward, and Tom could probably talk a little bit more about that. So total capex, if we exclude that 1.4 to be carried forward, is 2.6. Sorry, I haven't got my glasses with me, and that's a little bit small.
I think it's probably worth Jess also noting that the funding around the groundwater research also relates through to the Ngātaroa water investment funding and the package for the provincial growth fund. So there's closer to 2 million that's going into that leverage.
So that's a conscious effort to hold that funding, that 1.4 this year, and to leverage central government funding from that 5 million that we were holding. So that was intentional. There's a significant amount of IT capex which hasn't been spent in year one, and that's been quite a deliberate decision. So we've had a change in leadership in the IT management of the department, and we did make a deliberate decision to sort of pause and not implement software solutions to the organisation because we didn't feel the organisation was ready. So we've spent the last 6 months really working through ensuring that we've got the right systems, processes, and that the right discipline is in place before we go ahead and spend all this money on IT software solutions. So that's really, and I guess another part of that would be my time effectively has been quite consumed by managing the port project. So I haven't had as much time to sort of focus on this IT infrastructure refresh that I would have normally, so that has probably slowed down some of the delivery of some of these projects. But happy to take questions on anything specific.
Councillor Bevan.
The executive performance management tool, 330,000. What on earth is that?
So that was, we had a placeholder in the LTP, which was, so for the introduction of the PMO, so we've created a project management office, and we've created a series of processes, I suppose, or consistent templates. And they're all fairly manual, so we're using SharePoint and we're using Word documents and PDF documents at the moment. That was a placeholder for at the completion of the pilot. We were going to look at whether or not we wanted to implement a sort of fully integrated project management system. And that would also provide the capability for some of our organisational performance reporting to sort of map KPIs to, I suppose, internal HR KPIs to our organisational performance outcome measures. So it's sort of there's a program that Napier City Council use called CAMS, which provides that kind of integrated platform. So that's what that was a placeholder for. But the pilot has completed for the PMO, and I think that work just hasn't been done yet in terms of whether or not we do think that we need a software solution or whether the current solution is adequate.
I'm none the wiser.
Perfect answer.
There's a lot of manual processes being done internally that could be automated, particularly around the information that you receive around our reporting.
Makes such a pleasant change to see IT stuff being not spent instead of overspent, because that's normally the way. Can we, at some stage, have some sort of report back as to how all those projects are actually going?
So I've got an interim IT manager working for us at the moment, and he's just delivered me a report from phase one of his the work that he's been doing, and I'll bring back a summary of that.
Yeah, I don't know, some stage, because we haven't had one. We were getting regular updates, and we haven't had one for a while.
We did through, I think, one of the LTP workshops, we presented the IT strategy, which showed you the planned, so we've got a lot of bespoke customised software, which we're working towards an integrated platform, and it showed you the transition to that.
Yes.
Which was over 12 months ago, so
Yep.
it would be
So we can give you an update on where we're at with
we're
that.
at, yep.
Right, any other issues in regard to those carry forwards? That's that year one LTP carry forwards, the top line being the 1.420. Fenton, you've got some.
Oh, just the hotspot to Tera, what's outstanding there?
So Jolene perhaps can speak to that. It relates, I think, to the
So that's in the OPEX.
land access issues. But
That's in the OPEX list, is that the
Yeah.
one?
It is OPEX, yeah.
So the OPEX
Operating, yeah.
Jolene, do you want?
Yeah, so the project had planned to get through some of its deliverables by now, but due to being successful with some of our negotiations with the landowner.
Top end of the lake.
Correct.
So we have engaged with Freeman Rona's team to help us in that space. Just a couple of-
Thank you. No, I get it.
If you can help us with a breakthrough.
Councillor Belford.
The cheers.
Councillor Belford.
Can I just ask that the Narrabri water investment
Some more out.
be relabeled the Narrabri / Ruatanifa water investment?
Makes more
Well,
sense.
I think we, the council approved the policy relating to that, somewhat anticipation of central government's decision which way they go, and it's, I think we've called it the freshwater security scheme, and so part of the internal right was I asked for that to, if this is approved, to be changed, its name changed.
I don't get any of this. What are you saying?
The name of that budget is currently Narrow Water Investment.
That's because that's what it was for.
That's what it was originally.
That's what it's originally for. I've never heard a policy decision made to change it.
Well, in the
You can't make a policy by having a name change.
In
So
the text description of it, it is also funding an effort to explore recharging the Ruatanifa aquifer.
Wow.
Correct, and so we went through a process, through a workshop and a council meeting where a formal policy in respect of the $5 million was discussed and presented and ultimately approved. And the name of that policy was the freshwater security scheme.
So should we change that to freshwater security scheme?
That would be my preference.
That's the preference.
Yeah.
And then should we?
Regional freshwater security.
Yeah,
And part
should-
of it is the regional assessment, which does go wider than both Hiritonga and
absolutely.
Ruatanifa.
I just want to say this is a bad process. We made a decision, a lot of discussion about having some investment for refreshing Narrabri water, and we have money in the budget for that, and it's always been for that. And if you're going to make a different decision and change it, you need to make a conscious decision to do it that way, rather than put some text in the middle of it. So Eagle Eye Tom Belford spots it and then proposes to change the title. So we have a policy change by changing the wording.
We went through a process.
So that was Tom's point, that there has been a policy process around that.
March council meeting. I think we held a workshop in possibly late December around a draft of the policy in respect of this funding, and then we had brought it at the leave of council to a full council meeting. I think I can't remember the date of the March council meeting.
I'm not disputing any of the process that occurred. I recall all of that, but I guess from a practical standpoint, are we or are we not going to pay for managed aquifer recharge out of this $1,420,000? We are. But we can't disclose that? Is that, what's the issue?
Perhaps we're speaking at cross purposes. As part of the process I did, when this carry forward was brought through the process, I made a note in my written responses that we need to more accurately describe this fund as being the regional council's, the regional freshwater security
And Mr.
scheme.
Chair, Tonga Whenua will probably oppose the recharge expenditure.
All right, so Councillor Bevan.
So just one more question. Number 27.
Oh,
The
I must have missed that.
drilling, can you honestly put your hands on your hearts and assure us that we need to drill more wells? That there aren't
Jeff, yeah, that
enough
answer
wells on the plains or the Ruatenapa plains?
So you're looking at the regional groundwater research carry forward to 430, is that what you're?
Correct, it's
Yeah.
contained within there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yep, absolutely. I'm going to put my hand on my heart and say that we need to do more drilling. It's always been in the LTP, the previous LTP. What has changed everything for us partly is SkyTem has been put forward to go ahead in year 2 of the LTP, which is next year. So that's the biggest piece of groundwater research that will be done in this region easily since 1997. When David Dravid and Len Brown did a big project. And drilling will be a key component of that. That's also part of that 430k is...
So you can't use any existing wells because there's thousands of them.
Yeah, we totally can, but as you know, most of the wells are quite shallow. We may need to do 1 or 2 deep bores to calibrate the SkyTem data because it's going deeper than what any bores are. Also, we need to do a review of our State of the Environment network, which we had a new principal groundwater scientist start just over a year ago, and we had intended for that review to be undertaken this year. We decided it was more strategic and prudent for Janine, the scientist, to get her head around the network by doing the State of the Environment monitoring report. She's done that now. She's one of the first off the blocks to get her draft report done, and she's going to be straight into a review, so we want to be strategic about the drilling. As Councillor Bailey said before, you know, we could have gone out and drilled holes and spent that money. We wouldn't be having this conversation, but the bores wouldn't be as useful as or valuable as what they will be next year.
All right. Any other questions on the carry forwards that are vexing you at all? Given that
Chair, if I could just give the committee some comfort for context that the Hastings District Council is wrestling with $40 million worth of carry forwards in their capital program that Mr Hanson is overseeing.
Do it every year, and it's the same 40 million every year.
Let's on that note just quickly move on, because we've got now the comms element to this process, and just wonder whether, Drew, can you come and give us some guidance on... Councillor.
So the 2-pager we're talking about?
Well, it's a combination 2-pager plus the actual annual plan report itself, subject to its...
So the 2-pager, did I hear correctly, needs to go in the paper tomorrow? Is that what you said?
The approval for that is today and placing tomorrow, that's right.
What was the... There was, I think, the CE said something about urgency, or can you explain that to me? Why that needs to go in tomorrow?
The original... Well,
As the final decision's not till the end of the month?
well, it's not till the end of the month, though. Typically, when these meetings transact, the media have the opportunity to then go out with the comms from the moment that we receive the comms. So obviously there's a webcast today, and there's typically media reporting that's associated with that. So the view was that we would transact through the business today and then release it publicly tomorrow, given that it effectively already is in the public domain. Yep. So it is a lightweight plan for communication for this annual plan, given there was the decision taken not to publicly consult on this body of work. So it really is for the purpose of informing the community and keeping them up to speed with the tracking of this piece of work. So there was a media release that went out dated the 9th of April, which stated that we were on track with our annual plan and gave the community a sense of what the projected rate increase would be. And the reasoning for that media release to go out in April was that's the time when typically all other councils are consulting on their own annual plans, so we didn't want to be out of that loop of communication, and to give the community a sense of actually what our intentions were in that space. So that was an open fist, or an open hand rather, to say this is our plan of attack. Further to working through the detail of today's session, yes, there is the plan for the 2-page spread to go into the newspaper tomorrow, and then to be further inserted into the Central Hawke's Bay Mail and the Wairoa Star. I think the Wairoa Star. and
Get no value out of that.
And a further media release today effectively stating your recommendations from today's meeting and again, playing an open hand to say that effectively we're tracking towards the adoption of the annual plan at this month's meeting.
Right, any questions on the two-page, Alan? Is there anything you want to comment on?
Oh, well, I've expressed my disappointment. I think it's too late to change things.
I think what Drew's saying is we can take changes now. No?
No.
No? I thought I said you say at the start today, it's the finalisation of
Forget it.
It could be done.
Yeah.
if it's significant.
If it's significant.
Any other comment? Councillor Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to agree with Councillor Dick's observation that at that Finance Risk and Audit Committee meeting, there was I understood there'd be some sort of graph or some sort of table sort of indicating where those, how the rates have been spent, how they differed from the long-term plan in this year, but you've answered that previously where you said that at the end of the day, the differences were in the insignificant within the margins of error. So, in which case, I'm happy that we just continue as we are.
I too express my disappointment around the reference to climate change. I know it's referenced there under our highlights, and it's a very small reference only, but we did talk about that at the FARS committee, and I just don't think we are on song. We're doing stuff around climate change, but it's not finding its way into prominence, if you like, and this is another example. Councillor Belford.
I'm just noticing that the equivalent chart in the annual report itself to the graph that has 55.1 million in expenditure has 52.7, and is that being
The double page spread,
massaged?
we've assumed that the carry forwards are included in here because it's going out tomorrow, so the annual plan will be updated for your adoption.
Okay.
Mr. Walker.
Yeah. Just following up on your comment, I think we need to change the term. Scottish Parliament, they've now adopted the term climate emergency. It would certainly give people a bit more of a reality check about what's really happening. Everybody seems to be in denial and it's business as usual, life as usual, but we're not taking the matter as seriously as some scientists appear to be giving us a warning about.
All right, I think we've done our dash on this. It's pretty much a done deal. Can we go to the recommendations at the bottom of page 19? So we're looking to receive the annual plan. We've made a few minor amendments to the document itself. We note the carry forwards, and then we're recommending that we adopt the plan and incorporate those carry forwards. Is there a mover for the recommendations? Councillor Belford and Councillor Barker, moved and seconded. Any debate? Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Belford?
No.
Councillor Barker?
I reserve my position.
Any other comment on the plan? Councillor Wilson?
Well, I really want to hear the Deputy Chairman's view, so I'll put my view over and I'm sure I'll get it at the end. So I just... I know we shouldn't be looking backwards. We need to look forward, and there was a step change in this council to get some stuff done. But I remember 11 months ago saying you won't spend the money, and we haven't spent the money. I don't know what the total quantum of, if you took the civil defence part of the budget out, the 15% rate increase, I mean if you chuck GST in it's close to 17%, and that's what 120 odd thousand people pay. How much of that is, if you took the carry forward off, how much is left? How much of that did we spend? And I just have a real concern that we're rubber stamping, we haven't had a vigorous debate on every single thing. Sure, it's a brave new world for me personally on the basis that we normally have a hearing and we normally have a full spreadsheet up and we normally start with almost a blank page around what we've indicated and then how we've ended up there. So we don't get that opportunity this time. I get all that stuff. But I just can't support $6 million being carried forward some of the explanations I don't buy. I'll make one really clear point though. The staff have done an outstanding job out in the field. Never ever take that away. And I've said to both town folk and rural folk north who expressed disappointment to me, well, take it out on me, don't take it out on our staff, because they've done what's been asked of them. Sure, we haven't quite got there, and I put it down to governance. At the end of the day, we haven't kept a finger firmly on the pulse of this thing on the way through, me included. So you can't get too defensive about it, but I think for the sake of Hawke's Bay, the ratepayers out there have paid a lot more money in the last 2 years, about to go up another 7.8% or 9% if you want to include GST, because most people pay GST, don't get it back. It's going to be very hard to reconcile that we made a step change, we're into our work, but actually, by the way, Hawke's Bay, we've had to carry forward $6 million and we're putting your rates up by another 9%. Unacceptable. So I'll be voting against.
Any other comment from?
I'll be voting against it too.
Before I...
It is said that navigating the requirements of the RPC into resource management issues, and I don't think, given we've got a mediation meeting coming up soon, I don't think this is going to be helpful.
Well, we haven't circumvented the RPC at all. This is a council process which has been followed.
Business as usual.
Well, it is business as usual. It's not an RPC matter. But I want to comment and follow on from Fenton's view around the staff's commitment and involvement. It's been absolutely tremendous. We've got a new order, new regime. We've had the port. We've had a huge workload, and we've got a very pleasing result. We've got plenty of a black type all over the place, so we can't be all bad. The only comment I'd make, and the reason for focusing on the CapEx issues, was that I think we need to be more robust in the way we address this going forward. And I'm pleased to see the performance management investment taking place, so that we've got a team now looking at our various projects. Each one of these is a project, and I'd like to see next year that when we engage in the carried forward discussion, which inevitably we will, that we've got the project, we've identified the activity, we've timelined it, it's been a project that has been overseen, and we end up with a result that was unavoidable. If you actually look at some of the rationale there, alongside the obvious, if you like, delays and lack of resources to do the job, there's also a bit of laissez-faire. Let's drop a figure in to the budget by way of CapEx, and hope that it, and we'll, in the knowledge that if we don't spend it this year, it'll be carried forward. I think we need to move away from that and have a more robust process. And this has been coming my way in my own organisation of recent times. That's why I've got a good sore ears from my own board saying, if you put your hand up for the money, you spend it, and if you're not going to spend it, don't ask. And I think if we get into that sort of pattern, we'll be much more robust, because this is a lot of expenditure, it's a lot of capital investment going on, and the public's entitled to know that the investment is well spent and that it's been really well shepherded through the process. And I don't know if we can actually say that this year, but it does have a context of a broader issue. So I'm happy to support it, but with a caveat that this time next year we're doing a better job. Well, you moved, didn't you?
Oh, I seconded it.
Well, you reserve your right. Can I take Councillor Bailey?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm comfortable with all the explanations that have been given for the reason for the carry forwards. To my mind, it's an expenditure that's intended to be made, but it's just we didn't quite get there to making it in one particular financial year rather than the other. And what I would hate to see is I'd hate to see us becoming another episode of Sir Roger Hall's gliding on,
where the bureaucrats decided that because it was in the budget, they had to spend it before the 30th of June, otherwise it got taken off them the next year. And this is a process that allows staff to make rational decisions about how the expenditures are made and when they're made, rather than rushing into it just because of a particular deadline date that's been set because of financial requirements. And I think that's a very prudent way of looking at it. Okay, it's a hang of a lot this year, or it appears to be a hang of a lot, but then again, we've got a hang of a lot going on. So I'm quite happy to support this. But in terms of what Councillor Wilson has been saying, for example, with the Future Farming Fund, if at the end of 3 years we've only spent $500,000 of a $600,000 budget, then I would look at it differently. But the difference between the first and second year, I think, is just too irrelevant in terms of timing to worry about it too much.
Mr. Puckett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm very much along the same lines. The council put out a 3-year long-term plan. The work has spanned over that 3-year period. The budgets have been taken into consideration that 3-year time frame. It was an ambitious plan to start with, and I think it's just councillors need to be mindful that you needed time to get yourself up and running, and it would have been unhelpful if staff had rushed to get themselves started before had run before they were ready to walk, sort of style. So I believe that if we're in the same position next year and these carry forwards have grown, you have an issue.
Yeah, agree.
But for this year, no.
Councillor Barker.
I think we need to look at this in the context. Firstly, there are councils around this country now who have substantial debts. This council doesn't have a substantial debt in terms of borrowing. There are councils around this country who have substantial debts in infrastructure, unmaintained sewage systems, etc., and they've underspent it. We don't have infrastructure debt. You know, this balance sheet is pretty clean. What we have here in front of us is we have neither debts of no form, and what we have is we've underspent. That's what this says to me. You know, underspent, and the staff advise us that they have intent and can justify carrying the money forward to spend it the next financial year. I have thought this is an ideal condition. And I do want to go back to the point that Paul Bailey's made, is we have lived in a period of time in New Zealand where budgets were set, and if you didn't spend the money, then you lost it. We got rid of that for good reason. I remember going to a geriatric rest home run by a hospital board who, to make sure they spent their budget for the year, resurfaced 4 tennis courts. Well, none of them, residents, could play tennis. None of the staff said they played tennis, but they had brand new surfaces because if they didn't spend the money, they'd never get it back again. This was just driving insane behaviour, and therefore the government of the day, the governments later then brought in this practice of having carry forwards to avoid driving absurd behaviour. What we have here is we have underspent a number of areas. We haven't been up to the mark quickly. I think it's an honest thing to have said. We've underspent. We're being told by the staff, and it's credible and believable that they'll spend the money in the next financial year and carry it forward. And I think this is in a very good position. And I think we've got ourselves on the right side of everything here. I don't have any concern particularly about the size of the underspend, and if it maintains itself at this level well in the future, I won't have any concerns either. What I am concerned about is that the money is well spent at the end of the day. That's that we raise it for the right reasons, we spend it correctly, we spend it accurately, and we justify every cent. That's my concern, and I think we're doing exactly that. I'm more than happy to continue with the plan.
Well summed up, Councillor. I'll put the recommendations. Those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no.
No.
Carried. Division called for. Those in favour will raise their hand. Those against?
Raise your hand.
Yeah.
In favour.
In favour? Yeah. Those against will raise their hands. So that's 2. Carried.
Three.
Oh, was that one, was it?
3, right?
Okay. 3.
Were you in favour or against it, Alan?
Against it. Despite your eloquence.
Beautifully, softly said.
Well, yeah,
It was carried, what was it? Carried?
5-3.
By 3. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
We're really stretching it out today.
I just
Well, we're having a shocker, Chair.
6-3 it was actually.
3, yeah.
When do you think we'll be finished, Mr Chairman?
In 10 minutes, we're done and dusted here. So we've done 7.
Be sooner than that if we're going to get to the Cranford Hospice.
So we've got 2 items left. We've got agenda item 9, 10. There was no other business. So organisational performance on page 41.
Chair, can I suggest that we take that as read and happy to answer any questions that the committee has?
So any
Chair,
questions, please?
I just want to make an observation, I'll say no more. On this here, this is what I would envisage as being what we would get, but in a different form or structure for the environmental services on the environmental issue. This is a fabulous document. I really like it. You look through here and see what we're doing. All the check marks are in here, and we need to have a similar one for the environment, in my view. Tom will probably have some other ideas, but
Any other questions? Good comment there from Councillor. Any other items there in that report?
I perhaps put a question, Chair, to Mr Walker. Do you think this report would be useful for the Regional Planning Committee to receive their information on a quarterly basis?
I would say so, provided there's opportunity for feedback.
Sure.
Right. So we've got a recommendation that we receive a note, the organisational report, 1st of Feb to 30th of April.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Bevan.
I've got my right to speak.
The right to speak, Councillor Bevan. No other speakers. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no.
I've got my right to reply too.
Carried. So we'll move on to strategic plan implementation, which is where, who's looking at that?
79.
That's on page 75.
79. Oh, sorry.
75.
I take it back.
So there's a hard copy of the A3 printed out on the tables for everyone.
Yeah.
Who wants to talk through this? Joe?
Speaks for itself, doesn't it?
James.
James?
So look, it should be reasonably self-explanatory. You might recall that earlier this year, I think it was Councillor Barker who remarked that there's a lot of activity going on across council, but it was difficult to see what the overall picture of our work program looks like. And so what we've done here is we've pulled together a picture of our priority projects across the whole of council. And we've organised them by way of the priority areas that you set for us. And it's obviously referencing the strategic plan goals underneath. We have a range of both operational and strategic projects going, and they range from the early investigation right through to delivery, and then background through monitoring, evaluation and review. So these all sit at different points in their life cycle. But it is one page in which you can see the totality of the major projects happening across the organisation. And I just draw your attention to the people, processes, customer and results section down below. That's a list of the corporate projects that we have going across a range of areas at the moment to support the rest of the business and delivery of everything that lies up the top. So it is a comprehensive, all-inclusive snapshot of the Regional Council's activity at this time, and it might be useful for you and the broader community in understanding as simply as we can present what is a complex work program, the totality of what it is that we're doing.
Thank you, James. Are there any comments on this?
Mr Chairman?
Yeah, Councillor Dick.
I'd suggest that you cancel the second insertion of this annual plan two-pager, and you do a précis of the strategic goals to inform the ratepayers and our public of the aspirational goals of this council, and I believe that will meet with acclaim. It will certainly help people's understanding as to why the rates have gone up so much, and it will give an indication of what outcomes are expected to be achieved and by when, which will assist the understanding of our constituents.
So you're suggesting we substitute the annual plan two-pager with the strategic snapshot?
Tomorrow's there was going to be a second insertion, wasn't there?
Yeah, there is, yeah. 2 runs.
Yeah, I'd scrap the second one and do a précis of strategic goals in place of that.
You're talking about the bottom half of this, or bottom third of this?
Well, I think that's the key bit, really.
Chair, can I suggest that we'll stick with Plan A with respect to what we have to advise the community about with the annual plan?
Because we're obliged to.
But we give some thought to how we can present this material in a public format that is useful for telling the story about what we're doing.
I agree with that. I agree. I think Councillor Dix raised a really good thing. But I agree with that. This is an excellent document. The second thing I'd say about this is we are very good at creating and thinking up new ideas, i.e. Tom does. I don't do this, it's not a habit I do. Yeah, but I think when we bring these things up in the future, we should say, okay, if you've got a bright idea, where is it you're going to fit it on here and how is it going to work? Because I do think we make decisions about embarking on things without thinking it in the context. And I think we should have this in front of us all the time. So if we're going to do something, we might be impinging on the ability to achieve a goal. It's got to fit in the context. So we've now got a context, so let's work out what it is we want to do.
There is linkage with the annual plan, because the annual plan is a step along the way to achieving these time-limited objectives.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I can segue from Councillor Barker's observations and wonder where you do put, dare I say it, climate change in there and where we're going strategically with that.
It's down there, the bottom right-hand corner. By 2040, Hawke's Bay is carbon neutral.
So that's all we're wanting to say about that.
I know, but it's a very powerful goal. Do that. And
Hasn't to be managed with climate change.
Yeah.
All right.
And it puts us ahead of every other regional council in the
In New
country.
Zealand.
It does, exactly right. This is bottom right-hand corner.
Oh, okay. So you found it.
Shows you I read it.
Are there any other, I think it's a great point from Councillor Dick, and I'm supporting that we identify the best opportunity to replace it. We actually put it in the context of the annual plan as well.
It could be, this could be made into forgetting the top part for public communication purposes, the bottom part could be put into a more graphically appealing one-page advert. I'm not allowed to say more than that, but it could be made pretty compelling, I think. And we just lectured two of our offshoots about metrics and numbers, and virtually every one of these has a date and a number in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done that.
Excellent.
Done it over, given it a good kicking, and now we've come out the other side. So
That's excellent.
I think that's a great idea. So we'll receive that strategic snapshot. Compliments to Desiree, who's obviously compiled it, has she?
Yeah, we'll contribute it, but she played a huge leading
so-
role. Yeah.
So thank her for all her hard work on that. If we can just take it the next step.
Yeah.
Can we, the other question is, Councillor Dick raised the question of cancelling the second insert of the annual plan and using that instead. Can we make a decision as a group whether we want to do that or not? Give a
So
direction.
we've got statutory requirements in terms of disclosing the key elements of the annual plan, and my preference would be that we still have 2 bites at that rather than cancel it. I think we can do this as well as rather than instead of.
That's fine.
That's what I thought we've got to. We do the other as a plan, and then this in addition to that. That's fine.
Yeah.
So
Except the Wairua Star.
I think we can take it that staff are directed on this matter without adjusting the recommendation. So can I have a mover that we receive and note the strategic plan implementation staff report? That's moved by Councillor Bevan, seconded by Councillor Barker. Councillor Barker, would you like your
reply first.
I'm seconding the motion.
Oh, of course. Would you like to speak, Councillor?
No, as everyone said, it's a really interesting and well-constructed document, and I look forward to seeing another version of it appear publicly in the near future.
Councillor Barker?
For me.
Any other comment? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. Carried. And I think that's it, isn't it? Is there any more items here? No?
No minor items.
We didn't have minor items, so I
I
declare,
think stretch the meeting out a bit long.
No,
You
look,
can't really fit so
15
funny. You
minutes.
almost get a record here.
declare the meeting closed.
Can you just, so who's actually going to the new proposed Cranford site? Yes.
So
I'm
people
started.
want to put their hands up,
Yeah.
just,
Take your own cars, isn't it?
yeah, we cancelled the bus.
Just the two of you?
Service?
Was Rex going? He was keen.
If we go
Yeah,
in
he
there,
was keen. He was keen to go.
He
if we go in there, can we
declined because
guarantee
he
we
had
can
the
get
other
out?
meeting.
Well, I want to know how to get in there.
I know how to get in.
Over the fence.
Through the orchard, grab an apple, round the back, over the bridge, you'll be right.
No, I'm serious.
No, I know. People don't get in.
Ah, another day.